In every town in most cemeteries across the UK you'll find the graves of Commonwealth soldiers who gave their lives for freedom. If you get the chance, go and find them and pay your respects for the sacrifices they made. Most towns, if not all towns, also have a memorial or a cenotaph. This one is in my hometown of Bilston. Many of the surnames are familiar and one was a relative. At our cenotaph is a memorial to Lance Corporal George Onions, VC. This is his story in brief. Born in Bilston on Wellington Street to Zachariah Webb and Amy Susan Onions on March 2nd, 1883. Sadly, his mother passed away a year after his birth, and Zachariah remarried to Jane Farquhar in 1887. George was raised in Northumberland and Monmouth. Aged 18, he worked as an assistant to an analytical chemist. In 1904, George emigrated to Australia, where he met his wife Florence McFarlane Donaldson. Together they had a son, George Zachariah. In 1915, they moved back to England to a town called Sale. George went on to enlist in the 3rd Hussars Reserves and served in the Easter Uprising in Dublin in 1916. He later moved to the 3rd King's Own Hussars Cavalry Regiment before moving to the Rifle Brigade. Later in 1916, George went absent without leave and was involved in a disturbance. On December the 22nd, 1916, he was court-martialled and cashiered. Onions immediately re-enlisted as a private in the Devonshire Regiment. He was determined to redeem himself and insisted on returning to the front as soon as possible. He was back in France by April 1917. Onions was 35 years old and a Lance Corporal in the 1st Battalion of the Devonshire Regiment during the First World War, when the following deed took place, for which he was awarded his VC. On the foggy morning of 22nd of August 1918, south of Achiet-le-Petit, France, Lance Corporal Onions had been sent out with Private Henry Eads to make contact with the battalion on the right of their flank, when they saw the enemy advanced in large numbers to counter-attack the positions gained previous day. Seizing the opportunity, they boldly placed themselves on the flank of the advancing enemy and opened fire. When the enemy were about 100 yards from them, the line wavered and some hands were thrown up, whereupon Lance Corporal Onions rushed forward and, helped by his comrade, took about 200 enemy prisoners. He then formed them up in columns of 4 and marched them back to his company commander. His citation was published in the London Gazette on December the 14th, 1918, which was unfortunately the day that he was gassed quite badly and was sent home to recover. On the 13th of February 1919, the now Major George Burns was awarded his Victoria Cross by the King George V at Buckingham Palace. He also received £100 in contributions. In 1936 he moved back to the West Midlands, and at the outbreak of World War II he was commissioned to the Royal Warwickshire Regiment as part of the National Defence Companies. In 1941 he resigned his commission. Sadly, George was killed in a motoring accident on the 2nd of April 1944. He is buried in Quinton Cemetery in Birmingham. His plaque near Bilston Cenotaph reads, Lance Corporal George Onions, Devonshire Regiment, 22nd of August 1918. Remembering Bilston's own recipient of the Victoria Cross.